Hey everybody, today we are doing another topic video. This week we are talking about movies that maybe you really strongly dislike, but it seems that everybody else in the world seems to love it. These topics tend to be pointed and more hot take oriented, but my point is to try to open them up and talk about them, have a conversation about them. So we will start with the first person here. We have Ferris Bueller's Day Off. One of my least favorite tropes is those characters that act like hotshots by breaking all the rules with no motivation other than to be cool. He ditches school because he can. That's his character. No depth, no nuance, nothing but a pretentious, unlikable bore that's treated like a know-it-all. I wish the movie was about Cameron, who was much more relatable. So I think I reviewed this film last year, maybe a year before that. I honestly don't know. But I remember this being a discussion, whether or not Ferris is a good character or not. And I do think that it is an interesting discussion. I do not care for Ferris. And, you know, like a lot of people, you say here, you wish the movie was about Cameron. I think most people wish that the movie was about Cameron because he is the interesting character. He is the character who has the arc in the movie. So naturally, it's meant to be kind of a more relatable character than somebody like Ferris. And a lot of people do see Ferris more meant to be the mentor to Cameron's character and the person who is showing him the way, but also kind of sabotaging him at the same time because it's part of what makes him grow. I always found him to be a very overrated character, though I have to say, I think a lot of the reason why I dislike the character is more based on the actor. I think Matthew Broderick was very much miscast. I know that's probably maybe a controversial opinion. I just don't understand what Broderick offers to the character of Ferris, or why somebody in a casting room would go, yep, that's our Ferris. Because just to me, he seems like his acting style, particularly with this character, is incredibly forced. It feels very much like somebody who is completely uncool, trying to be cool, but is failing at it, at least from my perspective. He never felt convincing for me. It just always felt very, self-conscious and annoying. And I find his comedic timing to be quite poor. I don't know, there's just other characters in the movie that are infinitely more interesting. Some of them have very little screen time, and I'd rather see a whole movie about them. But for me, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is one of those movies that it's a classic, and I certainly love it, and I respond to it for nostalgic purposes. It's a movie that makes you feel good, and yet at the same time, it's quite shocking to me when you return to it just how messy it is. It's a real mess of a movie, and I think tonally it is all over the place, and so many of the jokes do not land, especially the kind of screwball section with the principal that kind of goes off on its own tangent. It just felt like it really doesn't mix with the film. That said, there are some incredibly powerful things in the movie, and they tend to involve Cameron. Cameron being able to self-actualize at the end of the film is a very powerful scene, but also there's just a lot of existential symbols and moments in the movie about these characters about to kind of step over a cliff, shall we say. They are about to, march into the great unknown, and is the end of their high school experience. So there is kind of that existential weight to the movie that I really like about it. But yes, there's a lot about it that is quite dated, it doesn't quite work. And I honestly do believe a big part of why the film never quite clicked for me, among many reasons, is because of Matthew Broderick and that performance. I don't know. I think that they were trying to cast somebody who could be a little bit boyish and maybe a little bit nerdy, so he's relatable and not just, completely cool for the sake of being cool. But I don't know, the originality of this particular character and what they were going for, I felt they really missed the mark. But again, just my opinion. Sorry to bother you. Even though I consider myself a social democrat, I thought the preaching in the movie was downright awful. The satire of capitalism was done in a laughably cartoonish fashion. Plus, I found the dark comedy to be painfully unfunny. I'm actually really glad you said this because, and unfortunately, I saw the movie back in 2018, I think, when it came out, and I haven't seen it since, and it didn't leave much of an impression on me, so I don't have a lot to offer in terms of commentary, but I completely agree with you. I saw the trailer and was so excited for the film, and then I saw the end product and found it left a lot to be desired for me. I really agree with you. I felt that it was quite preachy, and the kind of satirical aspects of capitalism could have been interesting, but for some reason a lot of the humor really felt flat to me. And I felt there were a lot of movies around the same time making similar sorts of commentaries, and I found them to be more interesting, more fresh. There was something about this particular film that felt quite derivative, and while it wanted to be kind of fun and zippy and all of these things, or at least that's what I recall, very colorful and bright, there was something about it that dragged for me. And it's one of those movies that I assumed a lot of people would probably talk about it and it would become kind of one of those cult movies, one that gets passed around, but you really don't hear very much about it, and maybe it has to do with some of what you are saying. I love the actors in the film, and I think, the style of the movie is very interesting in terms of the look. I really enjoy the music. I'm a fan of Tune Yard, so I thought that was an excellent choice. But yeah, it just didn't come together. But not to say that, there couldn't be interesting stuff from that director, from those creators. Tenet. Actually, I've seen a fair amount of play the other way, but enough people consider it good that considering how bad it was, I'm still using it. Not jokingly, there's literally no way for me to deconstruct why it was as bad as it was with this many characters. Every single facet of story writing, storytelling, character development, dialogue, tone, plotting, pacing, or theme was coherent, logical, or even interesting. It is literally a better movie with the sound turned off and watched as some sort of experimental art house film. The cinematography and the set pieces were outstanding. That is absolutely the only good thing about it. Was the acting good? I don't know, because the movie was so bad it prevented me from being able to tell. Okay, so when it comes to Tenet, I remember seeing that film when it came out, and I remember reviewing it, and I had a lot of fun doing that review just because it was a tough one to review. I found myself really struggling with the movie. Absolutely. I think it is a hot mess, as you are saying, and I think there were a lot of people that really liked it at the time, and a lot of people would dismiss it. If you didn't like it, it was like, oh, you just don't get it. But I kind of felt that the movie was so incoherent. Sometimes it would make, sense, and at other times it would completely collapse in on itself. And to me, just trying to understand it and take it in from a literal perspective is missing the point of it, or you're not going to enjoy it, I don't think. So yeah, I totally understand what you are saying here about it just being really messy, and it's hard to understand what's going on in terms of plotting, whether or not you care about the characters, and all of that. But I will say, I do think that is part of the point of the movie. So while I had so many issues with the film, and it does suffer from a lot of the Nolan-isms that I really struggle with so far in his career, there were things about the movie I kind of enjoyed. I thought that it was one of the first times I've seen Nolan really kind of ease into being self-aware about his work. I felt that there was a sense of humor about the movie, or like I could sense him having a sense of humor, being a little bit cheeky with it. Now, does it completely land? No, but I was kind of pleased to see that. I was pleased to see kind of more the meta aspects come in, where yes, I mean, you talk about, are the characters interesting? No, but that's kind of the point. I mean, the main character's name in it, he doesn't even have a name. He's called the protagonist. And so all of these little chess pieces here are meant to be functional. So that does make the very cold, calculated style and the very kind of robotic dialogue somehow starts to kind of become funny at that point. Though I will say, the movie does kind of go for more of emotional poignancy as it goes, so naturally that contradicts it. So again, I agree with you. I think it is really a mess, and a lot of the elements in it that I like, don't ultimately come together, but I tend to stick up for it maybe just a little bit more than people that absolutely hate it, because I think, I don't know, for me at least, there was more in it to admire than to just completely bash it. But I have to say, I do disagree with you a little bit. You talk about, the action sequences and the set pieces somewhere in here being really outstanding. And some of them were good, but overall, I do think this was one of the weaker films so far as building those big sequences and sets. Not a lot of them really stood out to me, and they're not ones that I return to very often. And a lot of them were kind of based on very strange sort of objectives that don't make sense. It kind of collapses in on itself, again, logically. But again, I do admire aspects of it. It's one of those movies I never know. It's like, do I recommend it? I guess. It's a very mixed bag for me. And to be honest, I don't know how many people love it or hate it these days, but I wouldn't be surprised what you're saying, that if a lot of people do praise it, because again, it is Nolan. Nope. I really enjoyed Keke Palmer's performance, and honestly, I think everyone performed well, but the movie nearly bored me to tears. I just feel like most of the film moves so incredibly slow. At least the alien mystery, and then you have the murder monkey off to the side. It just didn't work for me. I think I also set myself up expecting it to lean more into horror, given Peele's track record, and found myself leaving the movie disappointed. Well, I think that's more kind of maybe what you were expecting the film to be, because I think that that's really what, Peele was going for, is he was going for more the Spielbergian aspects, more the like adventure blockbuster, again, more extraterrestrial sort of stuff you might have seen in the 70s as summer movies. So there's more of a crispness and a lightness to it, but it certainly has kind of heavy political commentary and all of that. I only saw Nope once. I saw it at the movie theaters, and I remember liking it, and I remember reviewing it and having quite a few good things to say about it. But there are certain movies you see, you get the review out, and then months later you look back at it and it just doesn't really hold up the same way in your mind. And for me, yes, I mean, you mentioned the monkey sequence, the part with the shoe, all of that was very exciting, very dynamic in terms of just like, really good suspense building for a movie. But yeah, it did feel quite convoluted, and I feel like a lot of movies, especially movies by, well, not especially, but just as an example I've noticed with Jordan Peele, it's just this conscious decision to really feel like you've got to be so self-aware of your movies and really kind of layer everything with all kinds of meaning and, as I said, commentary, political commentary, social commentary, whatever it is. And at a certain point, you get too self-aware to the point where it's hard to really enjoy the film because it is so kind of bogged down by all of that. And that's how I feel about Jordan Peele. You mentioned here, Peele's track record, and you found yourself disappointed. And I know for you, it was more because of, there was a bit of a tonal shift. For me, though, I don't really see Peele's track record as being that impressive. And again, I feel bad for him, and I felt bad for him ever since Get Out started to really reach a lot of critical acclaim, because I knew they were never going to let him live this down, and he was going to be looked at as the next, I don't know, Spike Lee, the next, really great writer-director who comes from a very unusual background and kind of turned it around. They were going to use that, and I don't think it was quite fair because he had only made one movie, a strong film, a very solid film, but it was just one movie. He was still trying to figure himself out. But we're so desperate, I think, to have these great stars and these great creators, and we're trying to fill the spaces desperately. So now suddenly you see Jordan Peele walking around during press junkets, and he's got like the, like the multicolored suit. He's going for like I'm such an artsy liberal, college professor type. But all of it was probably picked out by a designer. So yeah, just so much of it feels fake and cringy to me. And yeah, I don't really like the way that it's going. I do feel like he's been set up almost for failure, because it's like we're expecting so much greatness from him. And it's like, if he feels like he has a big responsibility in that sense. So again, I wish that we could just kind of loosen our grip a little bit and just let the guy make movies and just see where it lands, because there I think you'd probably get films that feel a lot less forced, that just feel a little bit more effortless in terms of the storytelling. And not to say there aren't things that I admire, like with Us, I found that aesthetically to be very compelling in comparison to Get Out in terms of, the look of that visually. And I did like a lot of things in Nope. It was just kind of blotchy for me. While Everything Everywhere All at Once's experimental and technical aspects are brilliant at some places, I'd say that it crams the film's overarching plot too much to the point that becomes this shallow, flashy exploration of its own theme. This was first introduced to us in the beginning. We see these very real conflicts that many immigrants face in the beginning, and they're all beautifully portrayed. And then when all the multiversal jumping stuff starts happening, it gets very exciting, and then it never fucking stops to let us or the conflicts breathe. It becomes this needlessly flashy onslaught of absurdities, which I got numb to in the first hour. Half of the movie taking place in cubicles that I got bored of seeing, and then in the end, half-baked conversation between the mother and daughter in the parking lot, which feels such a letdown because the character work was overrun by the hyper-stylized Burger King commercial of a movie. Okay, so a little convoluted there, but I think I know what you're saying. And yeah, I struggled a lot with Everything Everywhere All at Once. I liked the movie. I admire its creativity. I admire its spirit. I can really feel, a great animated sense of enthusiasm from those creators. So all of that I think is important. I like seeing movies, smaller films, independent films get, that recognition. I think that's awesome. But I do think we went way too far praising this one. Yeah, when I reviewed the film, I don't remember when I did, but last summer I reviewed it. I had a lot of the same criticisms. I do feel with those multiverse films, it's really hard to ground it because it is so chaotic. It's very hard to ground it in a sense of realism, where it doesn't feel like it's being too preachy and where we can actually settle into things. But as you said, this movie, especially that midsection, it felt very much like I was trying to grab onto something, and all I could really feel was dust particles in the air. Nothing was really tangible for me. And I know that is the point. It's meant to be a very overwhelming sort of atmosphere when you're jumping from universe to universe and all of that. But I do think the point of those types of stories are to kind of hone in on more the human experience. And so that's why we get to experience it through something that is very unusual to us. It is a narrative framing device and a very tricky one, I think, to pull off, but I think the more simple that you can go ultimately and grounding it in more human drama is when things become really interesting. And with this film, it felt very ambitious, and it had a lot of kind of philosophical ideas, psychedelic ideas even, that it was kind of touching upon, but it's only touching on them. And really, rather than sinking its teeth into them, it just ends up preaching at us, talking to us about the meaning of life and love and all of this stuff. And I don't know, I don't really get behind that. I want to see it, again, more incorporated into the story more. It felt very much like, and I say this all the time, but this felt like, some college students who have never taken LSD before, and they suddenly, had this amazing existential, crisis or whatever. So they're standing on top of a chair, just preaching all this stuff. And most of us are like, okay. I just don't think the film is as smart as it thinks it is. And I don't think it's necessarily as emotional as it thinks it is, because again, it is really playing into that sentiment in a way that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I found a lot of the performances to be really good, especially the daughter, and especially, the husband as well. But Michelle Yeoh, for me, I found her performance to be completely flat. Again, I think another controversial opinion, because she won a lot of awards for this, but I saw that more as kind of a political symbol and having a lot less to do with her talent. I think she is an amazingly talented performer, absolutely, and this film just did not showcase her in the ways that I think she deserves. And also, I think she just didn't quite know how to shoulder the burden of all of these dimensions, all of these universes, all happening all at once, as we say. She could not really convey those feelings in a convincing cinematic way for me. Everything just felt, a little bit, as I said, dull, flat. In my review, I talked about the movie always just feeling slightly out of reach, or, maybe one step outside of where I want it to be. And it is kind of frustrating for me as a viewer. And I found just, the way the Academy latched onto it, it felt very much like a desperation to seem hip and to embrace a sort of change in the way that cinema is going. And again, it just felt very ham-fisted. But that is the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons, who are fantastic, guys. Thank you so much for your support, and welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.